Hello everyone, back at it again in my little yellow kayak. I just launched the kayak and we've got a beautiful summer morning here to fish. Bright sun, bright blue skies, very little wind. To be honest, these aren't my favorite fishing conditions. I like a little bit of clouds, a little bit of wind, some overcast skies, maybe a storm coming in. But we're going to make the best of it. I'm putting this part into fast forward mode because it's always easier paddling in fast forward mode. But basically the plan is to paddle across the lake and start fishing. I've mentioned this before, but I'll say it again. When you're paddling across a lake or any kind of distance, usually I start out by pulling the paddle towards me, and then when I get tired, I switch to punching. Punch left, punch right, left hook, right hook, left hook, right hook. And you're engaging different muscle groups when you do that. Instead of your bicep or in forearms, it's more tricep when you're punching. And you can spread out the load a little bit and then go back to working those biceps and your core. Anyway, and if you really get tired, you can stop and take a few pictures or try to catch a few fish in the middle of the lake and then just keep going. Anyway, in the last video, I talked about learning a new technique. And the Cliff Notes version is, if you want to learn something new, you just bring your rods rigged up with the new bait, the new technique, and leave everything else behind. Don't even bring another lure. Don't bring a fallback bait. And you're basically forced to learn it or throw up a goose egg. But if you just accept the risk, it's something you want to learn, I think it's worth spending the morning trying to learn it. And in my case, I was learning strolling, either bottom strolling or mid strolling. Basically, it's just jigging a minnow with a shaking retrieve. And as I'm shaking that bait, or I'm shaking the rod, which ultimately shakes the bait, it makes the bait go left, right underwater. It almost flips 180 degrees. There it is. There's a Crush City Freeloader. I got some scent on the back, and I've got a loop knot on the front, 1/4 ounce tin jig head. Make a nice big long cast. And most of the time I was letting it hit the bottom. And in the last video, I noticed I was reeling too fast. So I'm trying to make a conscious effort to slow down a little bit. I'm going to reel up my slack and see if I can force myself to slow down a little bit. See? Something in my brain clicked that I was reeling too fast again. And I'm trying to force myself to slow down. And it worked. The reason I think it worked is I was keeping that bait in the strike zone for longer. I don't have any electronics on my kayak. I certainly don't have any forward-facing sonar, so I'm doing all of this blind. I can't see the fish that I'm trying to catch like you can with forward-facing sonar. So I'm kind of relying on feel a little bit. And if I run into some weeds on the bottom, I'm going to reel in a little bit faster. But basically, I want to keep that bait lower in the water column than I did on the last trip. That's not a bad little start. So what I've done is I've brought 2 rods rigged with freeloaders, one in that bright chartreuse and white color. And my idea was just to test to see if the fish would go for a bold color like that. Any fish at all. Or they wanted something more natural. That's something I didn't test out on the previous trip. And I was thinking that chartreuse and white might be a good color pattern for smallmouth. And I kind of surprised myself. The first couple of fish I caught were largemouth. But that's all right. I'm not too picky. I'll take any fish that want to bite. And this is just kind of giving me a little bit of a confidence boost when I'm fishing a new technique. The other thing that I did was I brought 2 other rods with me to kind of work into the arsenal. One is a Super Fluke Junior rod, and I like that Super Fluke Junior when we don't have much wind, like today. And the other was a topwater rod in case any fish popped up within range, I could try to get a spook type bait on their heads before they went down again. You know, it's summertime right now, and the fish are popping bait every once in a while, but they're up and down fast. And if you don't get on them in the first couple seconds when they come up, that's it. You know, they don't just stay up there, wait for you to paddle over to them and catch them. So, yeah, I got 4 rods with me, which is a little much for this small kayak, but I'm making it work. And I'm trying to dial in that Crush City Freeloader is really what I'm trying to do on this trip, and test out the colors and see how the jig and minnow can work with some of the other rods that I brought out with me today. So I already got 2 fish in the boat. I've only been fishing, I don't know, 5 minutes or something. And I'm pretty happy the way it's going so far. I'm really forcing myself to go slow too, and that's, I think, what's making the difference. And I got a 3rd fish on already now too. I was really surprised they went for that chartreuse and white color as well as they did. I mean, I figured I'd get a few largemouth on it by accident while I was targeting smallies, but they really seemed to like it, and I was wondering why that might be. You know, there's a lot of bait in this lake, a lot of herring, and maybe it's just bold and different enough that it stands out. It's different from the rest of the pack, and that might be the case. And another idea I had was, I'm fishing pretty low in the water, maybe 20 feet down, and it's pretty dark down there. This pond, it used to be pretty clear, and then they treated it with weeds, and it's been kind of brownish ever since. Anyway, I think the bright, bold color might stand out down 20 feet. Better than a natural herring kind of color. So I got to do a little bit more experimenting with colors, but I was surprised at how well the chartreuse and white worked. Hey, that's not a bad one. See ya, bud. Thanks for playing. That last fish ripped up my chartreuse and white freeloader, so I ended up picking up my other rod that had a Tennessee shad colored freeloader, sort of like a tan back with some small silver flake in the belly. It looks pretty good, and I put some scent on that too. It's Procure herring scent. I think it helps. Anyway, same kind of thing. I'm casting it out, letting it hit the bottom, and I'm trying to remind myself to fish slowly, and that fish ate it as soon as I stopped reeling. I had another fish eat it on the fall. So I cast out, and I was just watching my line, and I noticed my line take off as it was falling down. I reeled down to them tight and stuck them. Anyway, both colors of the freeloader seem to work, but I feel like the chartreuse and white was working better, which kind of surprised me. I mean, it doesn't look anything like the herring that are in here. Maybe it's just being different or standing out from all the other herring, or maybe a visibility thing in that deeper water. But whatever the reason, the chartreuse and white was working pretty well, but I also caught a few on the Tennessee shad colored one. Alright, I switched back to the chartreuse and white freeloader. Trying to make a long bomb cast out there. Let the line go out till it hits the bottom. I don't want it to pendulum back to me. I want it to free spool down to the bottom. If you keep your line tight as it's falling, you're going to shorten your cast. That bait's going to want to swing back to you, and I don't want that. I want to get it as far away from me as possible on my cast. And same thing, I'm trying to go much slower than I was the last video. Trying to keep that thought in my head. Go slow, go slow. And I'm shaking it the whole time. And that bait is going left, right, underwater about 180 degrees. Left, right, left, right, left, right. Every time I'm shaking the tip of the rod there with my wrist. I'm looking around to see if any fish are busting up. And I missed one. I missed him again. I think I got him on my third try, yeah. I was lucky to get this fish too, because after I got him in the boat and took a look at my jig head, the tip of my jig head had broken off. And I think it could have been this fish that's on the line now, or the previous fish was kind of twisting the hook, and the tip of the hook point, broke right off. So it's a miracle I got a hook in this fish at all. Nice little bass. Off he goes. Yeah, but after that fish, I had to retire that jig head. It's no good anymore. The point's completely gone.
Hook point's gone.
It might be time to invest in some more jig heads too. The ones I've got are kind of old. So the main goal of this trip was to dial in the Crush City Freeloader and see which rod worked best, what color worked best, and just try to dial in that bait just a little bit more. But I also brought a topwater rod and a small Super Fluke Junior. And so if I could get close enough to fish that came up and were busting on herring, I'd launch that topwater as far as I could to where they just popped up and see if I could get a fish to commit like this one just did. And that's a pretty nice smallmouth. The walking bait I'm throwing is a JT115, an evergreen JT115. It's a silent bait. It's a lot bigger than the herring that are mostly in this lake right now, but it's silent. And I wanted a silent bait today because I've got almost no wind. I like a rattle when you've got some chop on the water. It helps the fish seem to find the bait. Anyway, things lined up for me and I was able to make a good long cast, and that smallmouth started following the JT115 and eventually decided to take a swipe at it. And I got it. So this tells me there's smallmouth in the area, and I was surprised I didn't get him on the chartreuse and white freeloader, because that was kind of the main plan with that color. But for whatever the reason, it went after that walking bait. So it seemed like to me, the way the Crush City Freeloader is going to fit into my arsenal is when the fish aren't actively busting bait on top. You can see I've got my head on a swivel right now. Anytime a seagull lands in the water or a duck lands, I whip my head around to see if it was a fish busting bait. Most of the time it's not, but I'm on high alert right now. But I'm blind casting with that freeloader and I'm picking off a few more fish. I wouldn't say they're inactive, but they're not actively busting bait, and I'm still able to catch them. Whereas I don't think they would be coming up for a topwater 20 feet above their heads. So I feel like this is another tool that I can put in my toolbox and, pull it out on the right occasion when the conditions or the season or just the activity level of the fish dictates. And I like being able to add a few more fish to my total, maybe while I'm waiting around for fish to be chasing bait again. And I'm already thinking about other places where maybe I could incorporate this idea, this strolling, different ponds, maybe some lakes without herring, maybe where perch are the main forage, and I think it's going to work out pretty well. The camera died for this next fish, but I did manage to get a picture of him before I let him go. Nice smallie. Happy to see another smallmouth. So I was fishing the Crush City Freeloader some more, and I was lucky enough to see a bunch of fish come up on some herring right in front of me. And these fish were close enough so that I could target them with a Super Fluke Junior. A lot of times I see them come up and they're on the other side of the lake, and there's no way I could get on them before they go down again. You can just barely see them in the top left corner of the screen. That's just herring, but there's bass underneath that school. I just saw them come up. And I can't cast that Super Fluke Junior very far, maybe 20 yards. So they really have to be fairly close to me so I can get on them. But the upside is that if I can get him to turn and look at that Super Fluke Junior instead of the 1,000 of live herring, I almost always get him in the boat. You know, once I stick him on that single hook, there's no weight to it. They have very little leverage. That little BFS rod just bows right up. They can't release the tension on the rod. And 90% of them plus are coming in the boat. I feel like with the Freeloader, that heavy jig head is easier for the fish to throw. If they get any kind of leverage at all, any kind of slack at all, even just a little tiny bit, they can use that slack to throw the jig head, and with it goes your hook and lure and everything else, and the fish go free. And I ran into some of that later on, and I think this next clip is going to show that. But the last two fish of the day, I hooked up to them, and maybe I was reeling them a little too fast and kind of forcing them up. But I know it was a little off camera just then, but that fish came up with the Freeloader in his mouth and big head shake and threw the Freeloader. Now I don't know if the tail got wrapped around the hook when he threw the bait, or that fish was able to throw the bait because the tail was wrapped around the hook. So I'm putting more scent on, thinking, well, maybe if he had it a little bit deeper, that wouldn't have happened. I don't know. I'm just trying something. So let's see if more scent fixed the problem of losing fish. I felt like I was doing pretty well in the morning. I didn't lose many on the Freeloader. Certainly better than the previous day. I'm fishing with a medium power rod. I kind of eased up on him a little too much because I'm trying to adjust the drag. And as I was adjusting the drag, the fish came up and threw the jig again. So compared with a fluke or something like that, a weightless bait with a single hook, it's a lot easier for them to throw that jig head. And I think I need to get the rod and line and everything dialed in just a little bit more and try to keep more of those fish pinned. And I might even try a few different jig heads and see if I can figure out some system to help keep those fish pinned a little bit better. Alright, I had fun out here this morning trying to dial in a new bait. And that bait is the Crush City Freeloader on a 1/4 ounce jig head. I also mixed in a topwater, the JT115, and the Super Fluke Junior. But I'd say overall the Freeloader was once again the star of today. And I think that bait is going to earn itself a spot in the arsenal. You'll be seeing that bait, or a bait like it anyway, a lot more this season. Alright, thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. Just like all my other videos, I'll list all the gear, rods, reels, line, baits, colors, etc. in the video description so you can duplicate what I was doing out here today and hopefully have some good success on your home lakes wherever you might live in the country. I'll catch you on the next one. See ya!